Hello, everybody. It's Mark Coxon, Director of Strategy and Markets for XTG, and I wanted to invite a special guest here today to talk to me about ISE. A lot of us just got back, or we saw a lot of buzz online about ISE, the biggest international AV trade show in the world. And so to get some input and some perspective from the ground, since Joe was in Barcelona at the show, I wanted to invite Joe Whitesides, our Director of Experience Technology, to talk a little bit about what he saw. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. For those that don't know, and thank you for having me on this recording. It's really great to work with you, and I know that you have contact with so much of the industry, and I hope I'm able to offer a few insights. My role is to really direct engineering within XTG, which is our experiential and immersive group that supports what I call the mothership of AVI-SPL. Globally, we're looking to attract that work and support it and design it and work with partners to do amazing projects. And part of my role is to work with manufacturers and partners and vendors, both from a got to know what the coolest stuff is to and the partnership and business development aspect of it as well is to relate with folks and hopefully answer questions and demonstrate that we are able to do a heck of a lot within experiential, and AVI-SPL has been doing that stuff for many years, but we're there to kind of tell that story of the history of doing immersive and experiential, and then to bring new work to light as well in supporting our regions who are out working on it every day.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about you, Joe, to go on a little bit of the personal side, is you're kind of an artist and a creator by nature. And so it seems like this experiential world is something that is you're very passionate about, is what I take from that. Like what drew you towards the special projects and out of kind of the everyday audiovisual world?
Well, I've been in AV for about 30 years, and the most exciting moments for me were being able to demonstrate, convince architects and interior design firms that I had something to say that would impact their spaces in a positive way, that would not only improve their designs, but also more seamlessly integrate technology for business use, permanent environment. And so those moments where I'd be in the room with the corporate real estate representative, like a CBRE or a JLL, and the architect and the construction project manager, and maybe even reps from the GC. And I've got an audience of people, and I'm like, really working them through a vision or a design. That stuff is exciting. It doesn't happen every day because in the conferencing environment, you just gotta do your job and make sure it's reliable. But there are times where you get this creative input. And when I discovered the immersive and experiential part of this, thanks to Chris Rogers and Julian Phillips, kind of bringing me under their care, I got super excited because here's an opportunity to really talk about an extension of creativity in ways that are so impactful to our customers, and again, supporting our designers and regions is bringing new ideas to them that they can then have those moments like I did early in my career too.
That's awesome. I love that. I just wanted to frame it up because I know, when we talk about products and things and trends you saw at ISE, I wanted to people kind of know what perspective you look at the industry from. And I enjoy working with you every day. I think it's a really cool place to be on the XTG team, and experience love your tenure and your take on the industry. So I want to jump right in. Like, people are wondering, what was cool at ISE, what we saw from an experiential standpoint, what industry trends we saw. So I'm going to hand it over to you. I know you had technologists on the floor looking at products. You were there looking at products. Like, what was exciting about ISE for you this year?
Well, the first thing that's super exciting about ISE is not product related. It is the extensive community of creatives who are now attending these large AV shows. So when I started, my first Infocom show was 1997, and there you couldn't find a creative agency representative, or people doing content and storytelling in support of brand and in support of customer or user or visitor journey. Museum representation, was totally not there, at least as far as I knew. So now these shows, especially ISE, attracts a community of creative people who are looking to get involved in great projects, but also find integrators and other, team members, professionals who can support their ideation in terms of the materiality of AV stuff. So of course we need to know how to hook things together and everything. We need to know about bandwidth and latency and acoustics and all these things, but mainly the materiality of saying, well, how does this fit in a surprising way to either visually or sonically or tactilely tell this story? One of these days, there'll be a huge rush, I think, of smell, olfactory stuff. It's there, but not there. Like it's more theatrical. But one day we'll have that sense covered as well, and there'll be an emphasis on haptics and stuff. But it's that creative community. So I get really excited about ISE because that. So I spend a lot of time working on those relationships along with my colleagues in XTG in terms of partnerships. One of the coolest things is a partner that's been a friend for a long time is Michael Schneider, who's at Volvox Labs now. And he had a recent LinkedIn post that the guy is just such a genius. But his prediction, and I was like, I wish I'd thought of this, was that there will someday, there's like 8 halls, like audio, digital signage, home automation, and all this stuff. He's like, one of these days, there's going to be a hall focused on media architecture that's showcasing windows and doors and walls and all kinds of stuff that is a product that's intended even more for the built environment, like a building material. And we see that stuff in, bits and pieces here. Like, LG has a film that could go on a door or on a window or something. And I'll talk about it later maybe, but Next Novo and MuxWave make these excellent transparent in-glass LED products that I think are very impactful. MuxWave is so impactful. It's on the front of the Fira Barcelona where this trade show is held. And Next Novo is in there doing really vivid, very sharp looking stuff as well in terms of in-glass imaging. So these are the beginnings of seeing AV systems becoming like building materials. And I think there'll be a growth in that. So I think Michael's pretty insightful in that regard. But I'll pause there, Mark, and not take all the oxygen and see if you have a question there before I launch into all these products that I've run into.
No, I agree with you that I think, experiential technology, no technology on itself is experiential, but it's the combination of things that you put together in a unique and novel way that creates an experience, right? And there are only so many ways we can use light and moving air to activate someone. So how do we stack these things in new and novel ways to tell stories in different ways? And I love your idea of, technology as building materials, right? For a long time, I mean, even since I first learned about OLED, probably in 2006 or 5, before where they were making it in mass commercial screens, it was just in like phone camera screens and things like that, right? No screen bigger than like 2 or 3 inches. In fact, I think Kodak owned like some of the first patents on OLED film. And it was on their cameras. It was on the back of their cameras as a viewfinder. That really started to open my eyes as to like, could this be a wallpaper at some point, a digital wallpaper with ribbon cables that connect things together, and we get rid of kind of, the interface of like, oh, that's technology. It's just images appear on the material and it's just a piece of the experience. And so I love that idea that you and Michael are talking about with this. Could be a whole hall one day of things like Liquid View, which are digital windows, maybe with a advanced version of that actually does head tracking and does orientation, parallax based on your view into the windows, those type of things. Materials that you can just project upon with lasers. I talked to a laser specialist once who said, with RGB lasers, we can control the frequency of light very, very tightly. So what if you had a material that only reflected those 3 red, green, and blue frequencies, right, of light, and then you could reject everything else because it's just tuned to reflect those frequencies of light. So like those type of things to me are super exciting. A little bit geeky, like on the AV side, if you really you can go down some rabbit holes, but I just love that take. So with that, like what did you got? What do you got? What did you see on the floor?
In no particular order. Again, mainly focused on making relationships. I had some fantastic meetings with manufacturer representatives to sort of build connections to the way they see experiential and the way the community reaches out to them for their materials. But starting in, again, in no particular order, Philips has something pretty interesting. They've taken what I would call maybe their midline LED product, and they've created, it's about to be released, a new controller that's made in Europe that is Pantone certified. It's called True Performance, and it was pretty stunning. I've seen this series of LED before without this controller, and it looks good. You know, it's a good product. Philips makes good stuff, but with this True Performance controller, I was like, this color performance is insane. It was really good. It was they were demoing a 1.5 millimeter pixel pitch. I was up fairly close to it, and I thought, man, really interesting. And I don't think they were really pulling any content tricks on this because content is the big differentiator between whether a display technology or an audio technology will be good or not. You know, for how many times have we heard Steely Dan being used in an audio demo, you know, by all the old timers? It's because that stuff is good content. It's well recorded, so it really makes speakers sound good. And similarly, good experiential content makes displays look good. But I think with fairly average content, this Philips True Performance is good. I think we'll see more of that stuff in the future, and making an alliance with Pantone. I've never heard of that before. And I think interior designers identify with Pantone as sort of the owner of color theory and the owner of pigments. And so, and maybe theater people see Pantone as the owner of gels and other things that are used for lighting. So maybe we'll see some stuff going on there.
Yeah.
Infiled had something. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say for people doing branded environments, like the color matters, like the temperature of
Yeah.
the red. Like Coca-Cola wants Coca-Cola red on the wall, Ford wants Ford blue on the wall, like that. And it needs to match, like the level of detail they put into their printed materials and their brand, and even the psychology behind the colors that they choose for their brand. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into that. And, you know, so to be able to say, hey, if we put this up on the wall, it's going to be your blue. That matters in experience centers like that, or in branded environments, or any of those things. So I think that's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's something, being on brand with your digital content is something I preach about a lot. I don't practice what I preach because I have, unfortunately, nothing AVI-SPL branded.
Neither
I
do I.
have these two water bottles, however, that are part of our old color scheme. For those who remember the green diamond and the blue diamond, you might say I intentionally bought those water bottles to be on brand, but now there's new ones, but I don't have that, and I think companies should be more concerned with that in their backgrounds. In fact, I have said before, and I don't think anybody was listening, that interior architecture firms that are really big and popular, like Gensler, maybe they should have branded backgrounds that were designed by their interior design firms to be on brand with their design style or with their client's design style. And then it matches what the interior of a building would
That,
look like. Like, why not?
that's an amazing idea, to be able to say, hey, we delivered your space and this is the look and feel. I was just at CBRE's new office here in Irvine yesterday, right? And their color theme, and CBRE has their own interior design firm now that does a lot of and it was coastal prairie. And so there were all these color schemes around coastal prairie
Oh,
because
wow.
of the location. So why wouldn't you have coastal prairie themed digital backdrops that you could use in the space, that if you're coming from that space, you're mirroring the look, feel, et cetera, of the office that you work in? Like that, it just makes a ton of sense. And I never thought about it until you just said it out loud.
Exactly.
That's so
Well,
cool.
thanks. Yeah, I hope somebody listening to this sells that, and if you do, attribute it to Mark Coxon. It was his idea. um, Infiled. I usually don't get jazzed about LED demos and stuff of just like a 16 by 9 piece of a video wall that they're showing, like, here's our 0.9 pixel pitch and here's our 1.5 and whatever. But I put my hand on Infiled WT series. They were demoing a zero point 0.9 rectangle. It was cool to the touch. I kid you not. I was impressed. It's a flip chip design that they call cold LED. It actually is cool. Like, compared to what I'm used to, why this is important is if I'm a presenter and I'm standing in front of an LED wall all day, I don't really want to have to, wear like a t-shirt or a short sleeve polo shirt because of the extra heat. It'd be nice to just wear whatever I'm wearing seasonally and not get roasted by the wall. This shows promise as being able to deliver that high pixel pitch, energy efficient, not only for the display itself, but for the HVAC system that's feeding the room, and maybe easier on the people that are using the system.
Yeah, flip chip. I mean, flip chip, the promise has always been that it can sink heat out the back. I wonder if there are any considerations you have to make for the rear of the screen in those spaces. Maybe not, but I just wonder if that would be a consideration. That's really cool, though. I know we've been in spaces, you and I have been in spaces where you use LED for more like an immersive environment, and it can get really warm, in those environments. And yeah, you almost have to create some clothes that are like hospital gown backless to stand in front of the wall. Like
Yeah,
the back
yeah, that's the
the back is like breathable Gore-Tex material, and the front looks like a full three-piece suit, right? Yeah.
yes, yes. Let's find that client. That would make for a really fun week. Let's see. Um, I mentioned Next Novo and MuxWave. The in-glass LED, I think, is really cool. Films look okay. I think as the challenge is the balance between light transmissivity. I'm trying to say that word without stumbling on it, and pixel pitch density, because we want that sharpness, but at the same time we don't want the components blocking light. I feel that whatever technologies those two manufacturers are using are getting closer to that high transmissive material while getting the pixels a little bit closer together. I think the images start to look really good, still at a distance. We're not yet at the point where this is a mission critical or a conference room product, but I see the potential. I also see the potential in layering. And Mark, this is something you were working on before. Layering materials, a transparent layer over a solid layer, because you can create these depth effects, I think. And when you have a product that's so clear, then that layering isn't such a big deal, because you're losing the visual fidelity of the background full video wall experience.
Yeah.
So that's a cool idea.
I saw that online in the Lang booth with the MuxWave waterfall in front of the digital. So they had a traditional DV LED in the back
Yep.
showing like the mountain, and then the MuxWave material in the front with water crashing down. And then they built that into set work where there was actually, rocks and ferns and things like that were physical
Yep.
artifacts in the space as well. So you had kind of this digital meets analog, transparent, opaque, these layers of experience. And I thought that was really cool. I wrote about it in Rave on my blog because I thought it was a really cool thing. I wish I would have seen it in person, but
It
I
was
think,
pretty good. There's a lot of distance between that background layer. I
yep,
think it was like a jungle-y or
yep,
mountain scene, as you said, and the front layer, which is just bright water. What's interesting is the material that they use for the front layer. It's not in glass or anything, and it's not an applicable or yeah, it's not a film that you could apply to something. It's like they took video wall modules in Photoshop and erased the backing and all the black stuff, and then just left the pixels behind, kind of floating in a matrix of interconnectedness. I have no idea if that would ever get UL approval here in the US, probably, but it's a neat product to start exploring. Like, whoa, what else could be? I'm already just now thinking of some ideas of things that could be done with that product
yeah.
besides layering.
You
But
could,
it was a compelling demo.
if you made it waterproof, you could make it look like a school of fish and like catch sharks with it, or put it underwater as a net,
Yeah.
like a big digital net. Psych,
Yes.
there are no school of fish here, shark. We just caught you.
Yeah, we caught you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the zoologist in you,
Yeah, the
Mark.
zoologist in me wants to take it underwater. No, that's really cool. I like that idea, and I love the idea of layering content, creating parallax, creating depth of field, all of those things. I think it's the next level of what we're doing. We got to break out of the X and Y axis and start using more Z axis technology,
Yes.
right?
Yes, totally agree. In related, not related at all, is Hive. Hive was something that one of our great storytelling and content partners, and AV consultants downstream, um, gave me a tip over dinner, to go check out this company, this British company called Hive.
Hmm.
And Hive was pretty amazing. I was surprised at first. I didn't think I was going to be surprised, but then as soon as the guy started talking about, like, what is this, I was like, wow. And what it is Intel Blade computers Like you could put in, it's similar to op slot, but it's better. It's the new op slot. For those who remember the older computers, about 2 or 3 inches tall, by about 4 or 5 inches wide, you could stick it into the back of a LCD screen and maybe run some applications in there with touch, and it would make it, for maybe for a classroom. This is a content endpoint. So you put this blade in there. It's not really a GPU. It's a CPU with a graphics output, if that makes any sense. You could put this into an LED wall controller. You could put this into a projector. You could put this into a display. But what it does is Hive's software allows me to take my images and span those across all those cards. So I could take 8K worth of visual and play it out across those cards almost in a parallel processing kind of way. So each card takes a piece at a very high resolution. And so let's say I'm doing a projection mapping thing, which is what Panasonic did at their booth. They were using Hive cards to cover, I don't know, a dozen projectors. And there was no external content server like we might find from 7th Sense, Pixera, Disguise, et cetera. They were doing all Hive cards. Hive cards can also live in a little metal enclosure, so they could be mounted behind something that doesn't have one of these slots. And they can also be mounted in a rack mountable enclosure for super high density. They also had some cards with a 100 gig SMPTE 2110 output. So really high fidelity and leaning forward into these newer broadcast transport protocols that are going to really differentiate products going down the line. So the fidelity of this is pretty high. I took some clients of ours over to check it out, and they were like, "Whoa, oh, okay, neat." Kind of game changing. So I'll
Yeah.
pause there and see if you have any questions about that. It was very exciting.
No, I get what you're saying. So, if you have an 8K image that you want to transmit, you could have 16 of these Hive players doing 1920 by 1080 4x4 grid, essentially, of those players, then distributing 1080p content to each of the 16 segments of the screen, et cetera, if it happened to be a video wall or something like that. That's really cool. And the 100G piece, really awesome. It almost reminds me, it doesn't remind me of this because you're actually transmitting data and you're letting the player actually resolve it. But I remember a few years ago, and there were some distance limitations, but about, oh geez, man, it had to be like 12 years ago now, 13 years ago. Matrox, if you remember Matrox, they're still around, I think. They
Yeah,
were
yeah.
making an endpoint that was like a GPU that was an endpoint, and then you had a proprietary extension cable that went back to the computer. So it was like, instead of extending an HDMI signal or extending a 4K signal across, compressing it, putting it down to a 1G network, and then distributing it across, you actually let the graphics card live at the display with the output at 2 feet into the input, and you actually extended the bus from the GPU back to the PC. And so you almost had like a distributed GPU farm, out of a computer. But you can imagine those proprietary cabling and all that kind of stuff. That makes things a lot harder. Now, if we can do this with, 100G network cable, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a great story, right?
Yeah, or go back to that original model and put the card right where the display is, and again, it's really Hive's software that allows this mapping to take place somehow. I'll let Hive speak for themselves as to what the technology is and how it operates. However, the implications are
Yeah.
pretty big, and I wonder if we'll see anybody try to pop up and have a competitive product in the space. But it's definitely something, and all of their nomenclature is all like queen bee, worker bee, products, and I've been wanting to say that at the show there was a lot of buzz around this product, but then I catch myself going, "That's too corny, like don't say it." But there really was a lot of chatter
That's
buzz
awesome.
around this
Hive generated a lot of
Hive.
buzz. You're
It really did.
Yes. I
Yeah,
wonder if they have
yeah.
the killer bee, the drone. Like, I'm on this. I like this.
Well, yeah, well, so let's invent that next gen product and give them the product names.
There you go.
Um, I also caught up with a buddy, Gautier Dahl. It's either Dahl or Dalia, and that's because my French is so poor. But Gautier runs a company called Odiho, which I've been thinking about for a long time. They do a lot of work in the stadium space, and in public signage and things, where they superimpose QR codes into the digital signage feed so that then you can take your own personal device with your own headphones, scan the QR code, and get the audio feed so you can be listening to it. Now, this would work at sports games. So you could be listening to the simulcast of the announcer. This would work in a multilingual context where I could scan and get a different language. They have evolved their product now to have more Odiho manufactured appliances that do the work, that actually do the processing, as opposed to maybe more like Nooks or custom built computers that they were doing in the past. So he showed me a couple of things. I think this is a really neat product and has other implications in terms of curated journey, where if you wanted it to be kind of like silent disco, where everybody's in headphones or whatever, you could take that whole idea and bring it to experience centers and museums and so forth. This product is interesting. I think we should keep our eye on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, personalization is a huge part of experience, right? I love anything that allows people to get a personalized experience that bridges the gaps of accessibility. I mean, all of those things, right? And this seems to do all of those. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. In that vein, too, another European partner, and it's actually sad because of how busy I am at these shows. I stood these guys up last year. I didn't make the appointment, and I felt so bad. But Real Time Department is a creative tech group. Also does content and stuff. If you saw the front of ISE on that Muxwave glass as you came into the FIRA, Real Time Department was the company that was managing all the content, all of the AI generated apps. There's a moment in the day where you could get your mobile phone and draw on your phone, and it would go up to the screen on the front of the building after being sanitized and converted into AI to look like sort of the dragon type things that you might have from the Gaudi buildings. So they would stylize your doodles from your mobile phone, and it would show up on the big facade of the building. So Real Time Department was also responsible for the cool thing you mentioned at the Lang booth. And I spent a lot of time with these guys, and I'm not trying to necessarily promote them as the creative agency, although I think they're one to keep an eye on. The coolest thing was that they took me over to the Samsung booth and they said Samsung is now bundling our digital studio software in with their video wall product and an RE camera. So you get a high quality broadcast camera package, high quality Samsung sort of XR ready video wall, and a kind of DIY digital backdrop broadcast system, kind of like we've shown at previous ISEs that we kind of homespun.
Yeah.
They now have it as a product SKU with Samsung, which is a huge accomplishment for a relatively small creative agency to have made that alliance and made us a resilient product that's good enough for Samsung to co-market. It's very exciting. It's something that I would recommend that our enterprise broadcast team talk about to people. Another cool partner that Real Time Department we should keep our eyes on.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems to gel really well with enterprise broadcast and this this whole movement of corporations to elevate messaging. I know you've been a proponent of elevating messaging for a long time. I love your play analogy. In fact, why don't you share it, Joe? Like your idea on communications that don't need equity, but they actually need some punctuation.
I think so. Yeah. For so long, and in the same circles that you're running in, Mark, I promoted democratization, and after a while, I started thinking about it differently. Democratization being that we all have an equal experience. If I'm a caller from home, or if I'm a caller from the office, that everybody has a somewhat equal experience. And I started thinking of it as, well, wait a minute, it's communization of the experience, because it means that we're all going to go down to the lowest common denominator of experience. And that means that if a home user is having a bad experience because they are limited to this rectangle here, that the office should also be limited to that. And I'm like, no. Like our executive teams, our best salespeople, some of our top technical talent, and so forth, they should be shown in a way that represents their brand in a high quality way. That if you're the the work from home person or the work from home client who's consuming this video feed, you go, wow, I'm left with a positive impression. It's like when you in the old days, you go to the law firm and you go to the cool big building, or you go to the bank and it's the cool building with the brass and the marble, and you go, okay, I feel good about doing business with these folks. Similarly, the video feed is a representation potentially of the quality of the brand, quality of the thing. So we want to really emphasize that a lot of times, back to what you were originally referring to, Mark, when we aren't careful about how our that transmission is, it can be really boring because we're transmitting from a boardroom this fixed thing, and I liken it to watching a 2 hour one act play with no intermission, where the actors never move, the lighting and the set never change, and they just kind of stand there in one spot, and we're in the audience just looking at this, expecting something to happen, and nothing happens because we can't change the view, we can't change the scene. And so sitting through that, we do it day in and day out, is tough. But when we get into more of a dynamic production that's shot beautifully, lit properly, and is on brand and on message, then suddenly we have something we can work with that's way more exciting. And it's something that I think we should be focused on. And I believe our enterprise broadcast team is looking towards that.
I think I'm going to have to cut this portion of the show out just as a clip to put on the enterprise broadcast team page, right? Just that explanation right there. Better than I could ever say it. And I'm glad I asked
No
you.
way,
I'm
dude.
glad I asked you to share it with us because
Thanks,
I've
Mark.
always loved that analogy. Cool.
Thank you. Thanks for teeing that up. I'd say the final thing that I saw, well, final two things that I saw. One is interactive scape. With no disrespect to interactive scape, I kind of originally blew them off. Like I thought, oh, well, we work with, two others
Yep.
that are doing touch tables, and for those who don't know, not every display can be put into a table orientation and used where you touch it and interact with it in a cool way. And not every display can have objects put on it that are then interactive to the content. But there are a couple that we've worked with for a while who do that. But I looked at Interactive Scape, who makes these very robust touch tables with incredibly good software that does object recognition and multi-touch. And I said, the way these are constructed, the way the software is done, you can't ignore it. I spent a little bit of time with Maximilian Geppert, who is, I think, a senior account manager over there. But he's probably even more than that. But he spent a lot of time with me, sort of explaining it. And I said, man, this is a whole different thing. There are plenty of times, it doesn't have to be a museum or experience center where we can use touch tables. And we can bring that type of technology to different departments. Part of getting people to return to office is offering things in the built environment, in those offices that you can't have in the home experience very easily. Like we can't have a touch table very easily because it's like a $15,000 or a $20,000 thing in our dining room. So having these extra tools that help you visualize or collaborate or share information in neat ways, being able to swipe something off of one screen with a gesture and it floats over to another screen, like they were demoing this.
Yeah.
So we could pass a contract over, or we could push a piece of stuff off. Really neat. So my apologies to Interactive Scape because I didn't give you guys the attention that you deserved a year or two ago, and now I'm like, okay, I'm on board.
Yeah, the one thing that I sat through we had that internal webinar with Interactive Scape a few months ago, and when I sat through that internally, I didn't get to see them at ISE, but when I sat through that internally, the one thing I liked is, I was an early adopter of multi-taction. I did a project with multi-taction in 2010 or 2011 when it was, projection based, and it was, 3 feet deep. You had to really, it went all the way to the floor, and then you had cameras through projection. And then it went to multiple cameras through LCD, and that became more accurate. And then you didn't have the same lighting considerations and things like that. So that became a better product. The thing I liked about this one was that their object recognition is actually using PCAP, which is what is on an iPad. It's what's on your iPhone. It's what's on your Samsung Galaxy. And then they're actually using they're using patterns like conductive patterns on the bottom of objects in order to recognize them. So not using camera through screen technology, they're actually using the capacitive technology, but they're using these unique, almost like a QR code would be, like these unique identifiers that created an electrical signal or a visual electrical signal to the PCAP that it can see and then recognize what that object was. And I thought that was really, really cool. And then when you talk about applications like the swiping and things like that, I'm just thinking about, what if you're a construction company and you're having to flip through plans? What's that old process look like? You have this big roll of paper, you have to hang all these documents because you want them in the 24 by 36 or the 48 by 36 piece, so you can actually make sense of the cross sections and all those things. But then you're flipping to electrical, and then you're flipping back to mechanical, and then you're flipping over to AV, and you're flipping pages back and forth before these layers. Imagine just taking one of those markers and putting it on the table, and as you rotate it right, it goes through the mechanical to the electrical, and then you can rotate it back left and look at the AV layer again. And all of a sudden you're seeing it in that real size and shape that you want to see it in, but you have this much easier way to navigate through the different layers or different pieces. And that's just one application I think of off the top of my head, but just being in this industry long enough and having to deal with those plans and do all those revisions and make sure you're not doing BIM probably makes it a little easier with collisioning and all that stuff, but still to be able to see it, in that way is really cool. So yeah, just being able to have ways to do that is really cool. Yeah.
One of my favorite tools is Bluebeam.
Yep.
Ever since I got it, I'm like, where was this before? And that ability to join in a session real time,
yeah,
and put in markups so that somebody else might capture, or to do red lines. I'm sure there's almost 100% adoption of that within AVI-SPL, but in the rest of the construction and integration industry. But bringing that together with these touch table type technologies, just as you were describing, it's just that it's so much more powerful, I think. Like I love paper drawings, and I'm a mechanical pencil geek, and I still have lots and lots of red pens and pencils and stuff, so I can one day, if drawings ever come back, I'll be ready. But digitally, the things that I can do in Bluebeam to talk with a customer or a partner and show what an idea would be like, highlighting sections, isolating things, zooming in, getting really detailed, is so valuable. And again, these touch technologies are key in that. And then there's one more thing that I ran into at ISE that I'll end with, is Seventh Sense. We've worked with Seventh Sense for many years. I feel that they make an excellent quality content server for creative applications. They do a lot, and especially we work with them heavily in the Middle East. They had something at their booth besides just the products. They had this little side tent, and in the side tent they had a mannequin head with IR beacons in it. Did you hear about this?
I've seen it. Yeah, I wrote about it. It looked insanely amazing. I want you to describe it, but I'm with you 100%. That's why I'm nodding and smiling. This is one of my favorite things that I saw come back, at least.
Yeah. So the thing was, they kind of home baked this. In other words, they did not use a creative agency like so many other manufacturers. The secret sauce of what made the booth look super cool was that they hired a creative agency with creative technologists to sort of middle the solution. You have Augmenta, who goes to the Christie digital booth, and they promote Augmenta, but Augmenta's doing that little cave with all the lidars and the extra sensors to make that content look cool, and it makes Christie look amazing by having that. But Seventh Sense home baked their own solution to do this 3D projection mapping tracking on a couple of different complicated objects. One of which was like a, I don't know, rectilinear thing with lots of different depths and stuff. Like they'd glued a bunch of squares, almost like a magnification of a sodium block, where it looks, very crystalline and everything. The other one, the mannequin head had kind of battery powered IR beacons embedded in it. And then they were using, I believe it was OptiTrack cameras to track the mannequin in 3D space. And then they had several projectors, projection mapping all on this mannequin head, which is cool, like cool enough. Like if the thing is still, we've seen that before. We've seen a still car at the auto show, and they projection map onto it and then make it look like the wheels are turning and the paint colors are changing and all that stuff. This is totally different. I pick up this mannequin head. When I move it, the projection mapped content changes with the orientation of the head, and it stays with it. And it stays with it in real time. In the demonstration, the engineer picked up the mannequin head and did this all over the place, and the projection completely tracked. And if you were to block one of the projectors by somebody standing in front of it, they had another projector that would come in and compensate, granted at a lower bit rate, so it looked a little blockier, but it would temporarily compensate for the loss of projected image here. So the fact that they could track, their servers are so fast because they were running projectors that were 240 hertz capable. They were using tracking at 240 hertz, and they were running their server at 240, but they're processing however efficiently they wrote their code. That was magic to me. I was like,
Yeah.
this is almost digital paint, I mean, it's still projection, but wow. Kudos to 7sense for pulling off a really memorable demo.
Yeah, seeing it online and just knowing what you're doing, right? You've got multiple projectors that you're pushing content to. You're tracking 3 different objects in real time, not just orientation, but XYZ location, right? Like as you fade it back, it has to make the image smaller. As you bring it forward, it has to make the image bigger. As you rotate it, it has to give you the right view versus the left view. But then, like you said, the occlusion, because if you put one object in front of the other object, it knew that object was in front of this object, and it would map this one, and it would use, like you said, it would compensate with the other projector to still make sure that it didn't create a shadow on the object behind it. And that whole thing of like being able to actually track the 3 objects simultaneously was even the more mind-blowing part. Like one object, mind-blowing, oriented, you got X, Y, Z, and all the rotation that you're doing real time. Now you're doing it times 3, outputting it to multiple projectors. I mean, there is a lot going on in the back of that brain, right? If you talk about parallel processing, that is parallel processing, like to the nth degree, right? Like, what is this input? What is my output? What is my output depending on these 2 times 3? And then I got to black everything else out, so I'm just not throwing light all over the room that I don't need, right, into the backdrop and everything else. So yeah, when I saw that online, I saw them moving it around, and I thought to myself, are they really doing that? I like at first I was like, are they doing what I think they're doing? And then they were doing what I thought they were doing. And I've known 7sense for a long time. When I worked at another museum integrator, they did a really cool, they ran a server that ran this really cool projection on a heart, like a metal foil heart at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Their servers did that. When I was at Barco, their server was running our, 3 projector 270 King Tut story about how, the chariots that go across the sky and why they used to mummify people and all this kind of stuff. And 7sense was highly involved in that. But to see this, I hadn't seen that level from them before. And it was really, really cool. Yeah.
But our audience might be asking, like, why is that important? And what I would say is, with these types of projects that XTG works on, it's the suspension of disbelief and the connectedness to the content and the story that is transportative. Again, I had to say it slowly because I didn't want to mess that up, but it takes you somewhere else. And if it breaks down and you start to see the technology and the real stuff sort of disintegrate, then you're out of the story. And then you start looking at the technology, you start noticing things, and you're not really paying attention to the message. And that happens like when there's a projected thing on a physical object and it's not aligned properly. It's just a little bit off. Or when somebody's maybe value engineered the speaker system and it sounds real thin and it doesn't sound real, or it's not located in the right spot. So you go like, well, that sound isn't coming from where it should come from. I don't feel connected to this moment. So this thing that we're describing that 7sense made is important, because if we were going to put an impossible image on an impossible object and put that thing on the end of a robot arm or on a fast moving object of some sort, or even on another person, an actor, or anything else that's possible in theater, perhaps, this ability to make that connectedness happen in a highly reliable and fast reactive way keeps us in the story and prevents us from dissecting it so easily, where we go, well, that's not real. It's not magic anymore. Like if Doug Henning, thank you. Like if he if his magic was shown from the reverse angle, like would we have bought into it? Like David Copperfield, like if we had multi angles of things, we could see all the tricks behind the scenes. We wouldn't have. But these technologies really are helping to further reinforce this story. Cool storytelling.
I love that. I love that. I just thought of an application, but I'm not going to disclose it here because I'm going to have one of the technologists from your team on a podcast soon, and I wanted to talk to him about a project that never actually saw the light of day. But now thinking about that project, the Seventh Sense machine would have taken that idea to like a whole new level of amazingness. So
Can't wait to
maybe I'll
hear
talk
that.
about him about that later. So that's a teaser for anybody who is following what we put out here on XTG. That there'll be some continued cool content from people on the team. So, Joe, this was awesome, man. You brought your A game. I
Oh
love.
man, you bring it out of me, Mark. You like working with you. I just feel so excited and I get inspired. So thank you for
No,
this.
it's great. So everybody who's watching, if you want to explore really cool ideas, whether you work with us in an office and you want XTG assistance, or you're a customer or a client who owns a building and a space and you want to explore some cool ideas, or maybe you heard something here that Joe talked about today that you'd like to explore more, super simple, connect with us. And we'd love to hold some conversations around these things and see them actually apply it in some of our projects, right? Like that's the
Yeah,
end game of this. So
definitely. Definitely.
awesome, man.
Well,
Well,
thank you very much for having me today. And I hope our audience is able to interpret some of my tech geek speak. And I hope that we'll be able to talk to you sometime about these approaches and how we can bring value to you or your clients.
well, this is the reason that I brought Joe Whitesides to the show. If you didn't know Joe Whitesides before, you know him now. Thank you all so much for joining us, for watching our ISE recap. And again, we'd love to talk to you about any special ideas you want to explore. And we're over here. We are XTG.